Hello, I'm going to give you some tips on Chapter 2 and discussion post number 2 also. So first off, let's take a look at the discussion post and what's being asked for. Just like the other ones, make sure you get this in on the due date and that you reply to appear the day after. Now, you might be a little bit worried that you have too much to say that you cannot say in 300 to 400 words. Well, if that's the case, no problem. You can go ahead and go over the word count. You cannot go under the word count, but you can go over the word count. That will be no problem. And so don't worry about that aspect. If you just really want to vent, or you're just really interested, or you just really want to explore through your writing some topics, that should be fine. So don't worry about that. Okay, the question for this one is prompt. What role do factual, procedural, conceptual, and metacognitive knowledge play in the construction and implementation of instructional objectives? Can you rank them according to their importance? Explain. Maybe you can rank them, and maybe you don't think you can. Explain anyway. So you're going to talk about the role, and probably the role for each of them all together, or for each. You can do that, but I want to have all of them mentioned in your response. Again, make sure you go to the library, do a careful search online for the best references that you can use. How you do Chapter 2, that's what we're going to be looking at. Now in Chapter 2, let's go ahead and look at some of the resources I have here. And just like before, I made myself a little cheat sheet to keep me on track as I go through here and as I talk about these. This is probably the most important chapter in the book. The objectives is foundational to your teaching, and we're going to see later in the textbook a lot of different methods that can be used, but they all rely on the objectives as spelled out in this chapter. And so this is the common thing that you should have in all methodologies are the objectives. And so this is extremely important, and I spend a lot of time with the undergraduates, or I did with the undergraduates, maybe half a semester, 8 weeks or so, just talking basically about objectives and how you use them in the lessons. As I go through here, I will elaborate on each part of this. Now, the purpose of instructional objectives in the textbook, they have good rationale for this, and I'm going to just quote here, and it says, instructional objectives represent key decision points in teaching in which goals are articulated and shared. Clearly defined intentions allow lessons to be focused and challenging rather than haphazard and shallow. You don't want to just follow the textbook. The textbook wanders. There's some things in the textbook you really don't need, some things you really do need, and the objectives that's set out by the state of Texas help you focus in on those in the TEKS, and then you're going to write objectives for every day. And so that you're just not going from one thing to another thing, but it's extremely focused, and objectives will help you to do that. On the back of that page, on page 18, they talk about what students will understand, what students will know, and what students will be able to do. If you have only one objective, it should be what they will be able to do. And to get to what they can do, you might need what they understand and what they know. They might need to know things, and they might need to understand things in order to do something. But the most important is what they do. And if you're allowed to only have one objective in a lesson, it should be the one on what they do. And the other ones can be assumed in that. So they talk about these in the book. The CUD format for instructional objectives, the CUD, and the K, of course, is for knowledge, U is for understanding, and the D is for to do, able to do. The know objectives. These would be factual knowledge. You need to know stuff. You need to know things, perhaps dates, the values of numbers, maybe the history of a particular era. You might need to know some scientific formulas. The conceptual knowledge. There are a lot of concepts that are based on facts, and you get a lot of facts, and eventually you come up with conceptual knowledge. Organizing information, and conceptual is not always factual, but you find patterns in your facts, and you can come up with concepts. Okay, as it says in the book, concepts are names given to categories formed as a result of classifying factual data. Statements that link two or more concepts are generalizations, taking it one step further. And so conceptual knowledge is good, not just knowing the facts, but knowing concepts. Procedural knowledge. How do we do things? How do you get from A to B? How do you put together a lesson plan, for instance? How do you multiply 3-digit numbers? There might be different procedures depending on if you're in Mexico or in the United States on how to do that, but there's still procedural. How to drive a car, how to, a lot of things, there's procedural knowledge that you need to know how to do. And we're going to use some examples from science pretty soon, and you will see procedural knowledge is very important there. Then metacognitive knowledge, and this is the knowledge about what you know, your thinking, what to do. Like in mathematics, they have you check your work, and there's little things you can do to check your work, and that's really good. I've gotten to the point that I'm always checking my work all the time, especially when I'm doing anything that has to do with mathematics, because I make mistakes all the time, and so I always go back and I check my work and I look again, and I know what things I mess up on more than others, and that's very metacognitive, and I know I need help. If you're having trouble with the grammar and you know that's always been an issue for you with your writing, then you should always have a standing appointment at the Writing Center. And for others who are technologically challenged in some way, you have one of your kids or a relative, or you go to the e-learning or OIT people to help you figure these things out. I can help you with some things, but a lot of things I can't help you with. Okay, so those are the know objectives. Now you have the understanding objectives. And for the understanding objectives, this is very similar to the know objectives, but you might know the formulas in science, but do you really understand them? You know how they got to them. You know how they're relevant to other things. And so knowing is one thing, understanding is another. You might know how to read the words on a page. You might know their definitions, but when they're all put together in a novel, do you understand the author's intent or what the conclusion is in what you're reading? Some of us are weaker in this area than others, and we need to spend more time on our comprehension or understanding. And then there's the able to do objectives. And everything that is measured is basically through what you're able to do. And you're going to see the able to do in the TEKS example I'm going to show you pretty soon, because these are the most important ones. It's not just I'm going to tell my students everything I know, and I'm going to make the assumption they know it. I'm going to give them a quiz. Some of them are going to do really well. Some are going to do very poorly. And so that means that some of them learn, some of them not. And so that puts all the pressure on you. If they failed, why did they fail? Is it you, the teacher, that caused them to fail, that you didn't express it well or not? The able to do objectives are very important. You want students to do something, not just answer true, false, multiple choice. You can maybe find out some of the factual knowledge through multiple choice, but how many jobs have you applied for lately where you take a multiple choice test or a true, false test in order to get hired? Or they want you to be able to do something. Okay, they don't care if you're a good test taker or if you're good at multiple choice. I'm really good at multiple choice, but I've never got a job because I'm good at multiple choice. That means I can reason perhaps, but moving from standards to objectives. We got to have, let me look to the TEKS, and I've talked about the TEKS in the previous video. And you can look up the TEKS by just doing TEKS in your browser, in your search engine, Google or whatever, and you will come up with something that is the TEKS, Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. And then you have the different subject areas, and I choose science because I believe several of you are going to end up teaching science, probably at the middle school level. I'm not sure, but that's where the jobs are in science. 6th grade science. It talks about the things, the strands and so forth, but eventually you get down to the objectives, and they are numbered, the knowledge and skills. Knowledge and skills. Scientific investigation and reasoning. The student uses scientific inquiry methods during laboratory and field investigations. While there are inquiry methods, there are laboratory field investigations. What is the difference between those and reasoning? Those might be the knowledge, they might be the understanding objectives, but look at these and how closely they are to the do objectives. Plan and implement comparative and descriptive investigations by making observations, asking well-defined questions, and using appropriate equipment and technology. Who is planning and implementing these? It is the students, as the student is expected to. Now, the teacher might model for the student, but after the teacher explains and models and clarifies, at the end, to know that the student really knows that the student is planning and implementing these investigations by asking well-defined questions, not the teacher asking, students asking, using appropriate equipment technology, not the teacher doing it, but the student doing it. Another one, C, collect and record data using the International System of Units, SI, and qualitative means such as labeling, drawings, writing, and graphic organizers. Well, maybe they don't know what graphic organizers are. You're going to have to, that's the knowledge or the understanding. The International System of Units is probably the knowledge, again. And qualitative means such as labeling, drawings, and so forth. You're going to have to do have a little understanding there. So this is a big thing for the students to do. And you're going to have to teach them that, and they're going to be able to do these things to show that they have actually learned what you're teaching. Okay, now while we're here, we're going to talk about backward design. That's a little bit part of the chapter. I didn't like the explanation they gave in the chapter. I'll give you the way I see the backward design and how I taught it for the last several years. Related to this, we have, suppose we have this objective, this do objective, able to do, plan and implement comparative and descriptive investigations by making observations, asking well-defined questions, and using appropriate equipment and technology. Okay, this is what we want the student to do. It's not the end. It's not that you get to this after you've explained and done quizzes and true false and everything else. This is where you start with what the student is expected to do. Instead of that coming at the end, you think of that first. And then from there, you come up with your objective. For instance, you want them to be able to do an investigation for a science fair. And then how are you going to know that they can do this thing here, plan and implement a comparative and descriptive investigation? How are you going to know? They're probably going to do it. You're going to grade it with a rubric or something like that. That's how you're going to know that they've accomplished this. And so once you know what they're supposed to be able to do and how you're going to assess it, lastly, not at the beginning, but at the end, you decide on how you're going to teach it, what teaching materials you're going to use, and your strategy for presenting it to the students. That's what you decide at the end once you know first what the objective is, and second, how you're going to assess it. And then from there, you plan your instruction so that they will have success. That's the essence of backward design. Okay, so moving from standards to objectives, I mentioned that here. Instructional alignment, of course, you want to have all these. I mentioned this earlier, that if you're going to have, you start with the to-do, I think is the most important, and based on what they're able to do, then you will have something very closely related for the understanding and for the knowledge objectives, so that they build together and they are aligned together in order to accomplish this objective of what they're going to do, and especially like the ones we had in the TEKS that align with the TEKS as well. So you don't have them moving from one thing to another thing to another thing that are unrelated, but you have those objectives in a very focused lesson. It talks in the book about Bloom's taxonomy, and we have, I've been teaching for the last 20 years or so, Bloom's taxonomy, the old Bloom's taxonomy, which is essentially the same as the new Bloom's taxonomy. They just reordered the last two. Okay, in the new Bloom's taxonomy, as they have in the book on page 27, they have remembering. Well, we called that knowledge in the old Bloom's taxonomy. They have, in the new one, they have understanding in the textbook, and that's the same as comprehension. They have, on the new one, applying. The old one, it was application. The next one after that was analyzing. they have it here as a verb, and it was analysis, which is a noun in the old Bloom's taxonomy. And in the new Bloom's taxonomy, they have evaluating, and then they have creating. Evaluating in the old Bloom's taxonomy was evaluation, and the creating in the old Bloom's taxonomy was synthesis. And they had synthesis first, and then they had evaluation last. One before that, not first, but and so you're going from the highest levels of reasoning, according to the new Bloom's taxonomy, is creating, and in the old one, the highest level was evaluation. I kind of disagree with this a little bit, the new one, because when I think about it, who gets paid the big bucks? When you get hired to work, say, at McDonald's, or as a new teller at the bank, or a lot of jobs, you have supervisors and they tell you exactly how to do your job, what to say to people, they train you. If this happens, you do this. You follow the rules. And that's basically application. That's it. And now analyzing, if you can change the rules and you can make recommendations, that's analyzing. You analyze what's happening and you can do analysis that it's not working here, we can do better. That's an analysis. When you're working at a McDonald's or at the bank, you don't have much room for creativity. Now, if you're the teacher, yes, you're creating lesson plans. Each individual child has their own needs. You are being very creative and you're using all your creative juices all the time. And that's the wonderful thing about teaching, that you can be so creative every day, every moment. You're in the creativity mode. Now, the principal, I used to be the boss, not the principal, but I was the department chair for the curriculum and instruction, teacher and pedagogy, before Dr. Lin was. And in that one, I pretty much did not have much room for creativity anymore. I was a manager, but I had to make a lot of decisions. The people who get paid more generally are making decisions that the other people cannot make. Like if the school teacher is having trouble with the student or the parents or something else, or there's something terrible that happens in school, some kind of tragedy, somebody's breaking the law or something, then the principal comes in and they have to lead, and they're the ones that get blamed for everything if things don't work out. They're hiring, they're firing, they're doing evaluations of everybody all the time. And so the people at the top have a job that is very demanding, that they're always making decisions and always doing evaluation. They have no room for creativity, unfortunately. And so is one better than the other? I prefer being creative like I am when I make these videos and put this course together, choosing the prompts that I think will be most productive and help you to learn. But the boss, they don't get to do that much anymore. And they really love, after you're making all these decisions and everybody's mad at you all the time. The people above you are mad at you, the people below you are mad at you. It's really nice to step back and go back to being creative, even though it doesn't pay as well. And so my 2 cents about the levels of Bloom's taxonomy. I love the creative part, but I also respect those who do the evaluation. And you do the evaluation when you actually grade papers and give students a final grade. Okay, formative assessment. Formative assessment is the most important assessment as far as I'm concerned. It's the summative assessment that gives you the grade. But the formative assessment is the feedback you get. And I try to give you feedback on your assignments. I am trying to prepare you for assignments by telling you what to expect and what my expectations are. That's formative in a way. But then when you ask me questions, I'm finding out that more than one person is asking me the same question. It means I haven't been very clear. And so that's a formative assessment, changes my instruction. If I'm not happy with the way my students are answering the questions, probably my fault that I did not make it clear enough, or maybe my students aren't putting the proper effort into the assignment, and I have to find that as well. And for students, when they get feedback, say, okay, I'm weak in this area, I can improve, I didn't understand that. That's formative assessment. So when the teacher is asking questions of the class and nobody can answer that means something's wrong. Or when they're answering, it's off a little bit. That means the teacher needs to reteach something. So that's the formative assessment, that you're giving feedback all the time. It's usually not graded. It can be a practice test, a practice quiz. That's not part of the final grade. That would be a good formative assessment. The summative assessment is basically the assessment you do where you get the grade. It can be one at the end of the year, end of the term, or it can be just daily assignments like we have in this class. Is in a way a summative and a formative. It's a summative assessment in that you cannot redo it. But when you send me the draft of your assignment ahead of time, and make sure it's always through the TAMU email, make sure it's always an attachment. I'm not going to read your assignments once they're posted and then give you feedback so you can correct it. But if you want to get it corrected before you submit it, you have to send it to me and I will give you feedback. I will tell you a few things, and I say, if you need more information, please give me a call and I'll give you my phone number. I'd love to do that. Don't think you're ever bothering me. If I'm busy, like I will be in a couple of hours, then I will just not answer until I'm free again. But it shouldn't be more than a few hours, as long as you do it before 10 o'clock p.m. Laredo time. I should be able to give you some feedback. Good luck on this chapter. If you have any questions, please let me know.